Hello, ladies. Welcome to the webinar and Friendship in Ministry. So excited that you're here. My name is Alicia Wong, the Women's Ministry Specialist here at Lifeway. And I wanted to just invite and ask you all if you will put in chat where you're from, your names, and where you're joining us from. We would love that. I do have a couple of announcements to make before we get started and want to share with you each month that we give away free resources to someone on our Ministry to Women newsletter list. So you'd want to go to lifeway.com ministry news to sign up. We also have giveaways during this month of November. We're actually giving away No Greater Love by Rebecca McLaughlin. And there's also these You Lead webinar exclusive. We also give away a free ebook, Dr. Kelly King's Ministry to Women, and you want to use the promo code Ministry to Women Free at checkout. And so I think that Catherine's going to put the link on there for you. And also during this webinar time, we actually have a question and answer button at the bottom for you to ask any specific questions along the way. Because if you put it in chat, they kind of run really fast and we're going to miss those questions that are important. So please put them there, and Catherine's going to help us manage. So Catherine, you see her lovely face on the bottom, although her video's not on, but she is monitoring and helping us with the chat. So we also appreciate her doing that. But I want to introduce to you three lovely panelists that we have on. I've had the opportunity to get to know them. We have Dr. Michelle Hicks. First and foremost, she's top on my screen, and so want to welcome. And we're going to ask each of them to share a little bit about who they are and where they're serving in ministry and their involvement with women's ministry. We also have Heather Johnson and Faith Grosshans. So we're so excited for the three of them. So if you'll introduce yourselves, lady, and then we're going to go ahead and jump right into our topics today.
Okay, I'm going to start because if you've ever been on this webinar, I'm here pretty much every time. Michelle Hicks, I'm so happy to see all my friends, your names popping up and where you're from. I am the manager for the magazine and devotional team at Lifeway, and then also with the training team with Lifeway Women. And so this is my world all the time, and I love it so much, and love you all. I'm seeing names that I know and people that I know in person, and it's so fun to see you on here today.
My name is Heather. I am the mom of four and a pastor slash professor's wife. I've served alongside him in ministry for about 29 years and then worked specifically with ministry to women probably about the last 15. Currently, I'm serving at New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary as their assistant director and instructor in the Thrive Ministry Wives program, and also in student life as the Women's Life Coordinator. I also love serving the local church. My home church is Franklin Avenue Baptist Church, and I serve as a Bible teacher there and as part of their women's ministry staff.
Hey ladies, I'm echoing what everyone is saying. It's so fun to see where everyone's coming from and some familiar names that are popping up here. But if I haven't met you yet, my name is Faith Grosshans, and I'm currently a girls minister out in Houston, Texas at Woodridge Baptist Church. So I've been here about 5.5 years now. Before that, I was actually living in Nashville, serving on the Fuge team at Lifeway. And so got a lot of just really fun opportunities to work with different departments. And that was one of the moments that I got connected with the women's ministry. And so I still have the opportunity to do different engagements and with the You Lead team with Lifeway Women. And so it's just been so fun. A lot of student ministry is family and women's ministry as well for any of those girls or student ministers that are on here. And so it's just such an honor to be able to serve you guys today.
As we get started, there is actually a question I'd like to ask for those that are participants. Where the question is, and Catherine's going to put on the chat as well, is where are your friendships in ministry now? So I would love for you all to just respond in the chat. So some suggestions. Are you isolated where you're like, I need friends? Is it local friendships where I have a group of friends in my local community? virtual friendships, my friendships are all online. Seasonal friendships, where my friendships come and go based on the season I'm in. Is it a long-standing friendship, my friendships that have stood the test of time, or a combination of those mentioned above? So where are your friendships in ministry? We love to hear feedback from you. And as you all are typing in, I like to start off our first questions is, what does friendship look like for you as you serve in different roles of ministry for each of you? Because each of you have said, I've done this and I've done that, you know. So what does friendship, look like for you? We'll start off with Heather.
Okay. All right, I was moving for the mute button, so that's good. That's good. So I would say, for me, serving in ministry as a ministry wife, pastor's wife, friendship for me really is that place of confidence and encouragement, a place where I can kind of go and not be on in ministry, thinking first and foremost about how to serve, but just really thinking about how I can be with this friend, and someone who understands the unpredictability of ministry. When you get that phone call and you need to attend to something, looking for a friend that that would be able to handle that and walk with you through that. Also, moving to new cities and taking on new roles in ministry, I think just being present and enjoying all the women that God blesses me to be around, and then being on the lookout for those women that kind of pop up that I want to spend a little bit more time with.
All right. So I think for me, it has, and I'll get into this a little bit throughout today's different topics, but I echo what Heather said, especially when you're moving around to different cities and trying to figure out what does friendship actually look like. And it's so funny to me because I remember when I moved from Florida, where I'm originally from, to Nashville. And I was trying to find a home church and trying to build those relationships. I remember thinking, if I didn't know the Lord, I don't know how much I would want to enter into this building because it can be such a scary thing. And so I think now being on the other side of it, those moments are the ones that fuel me into being, I think, not only a good friend, but a good minister and greeter to those who are coming into our church buildings for the first time, because I remember what it was like to step into that place and be, wide-eyed and bushy-tailed about where was the bathroom and who was I going to talk to. And so I think all of those experiences have really given me, I think, a big place of passion for developing friendships and wanting people to feel like there's a seat at the table for them in any space, especially within the church, no matter our backgrounds or stories. And so this is something I'm really passionate about and excited to get into, but I don't want to ruin all my things I have for today. So
That's so funny. Okay, I honestly, I was looking in the chat and I'm like, Donna, Tessa, Latika, and many, many more were all putting a combo of these things or all of the above or whatever. And I think that's really for me too, because it really speaks to the seasons of life. I look back at the time when I had uh, younger children, especially in the years they were involved in so many school or church activities. It just seems like there were friends all around all the time. Theirs or mine or, mom friends or whatever it was. But my season of life now is really different because I've been caring for elderly parents. And so I don't have the capacity to maybe develop some friendships or even sometimes maintain the friendships I do have at the level maybe that I would want. And so that's why I'm really thankful for some old friends that continue to be my friend even when I don't feel like I'm a good friend, just because of the time allotment that I have. And I'm also thankful for those friends because they know um, they know me through a different season, know know the family members that we're caring for when they were younger and thriving and able to get out more. And so it's been real sweet to see how those friends have really been there for us in particular, been there for me. Um, but it's so interesting. There's a lot of friendships that are not related to ministry that I've had through the years. And then there are those, that we developed, because of going to ball games or going things. And then there are those really deep friendships that I look at that I'm so thankful for being in a solid church. I do answer all of the above, on the little question we ask. But seasons of life really change my friendships in a lot of ways.
I love the fact that on this panel, each of us are in different seasons of life, right? I think, Faith, if I can mention the fact that you're single, right? And in leadership, what does that look like for you in this season as a single woman in ministry leadership? Okay. And how do you build those friendships out? Because we all need them. We all need friends, but so much harder when you're sitting in that leadership position where everyone sometimes wants to be your friend. The girls that you minister want to be your friend. The parents of the girls want to be your friend. So what does that look like? Because Michelle had talked about her different seasons, and we're going to get to that in a little bit as well. But we're going to start off with just being single and in ministry leadership.
Absolutely. I have a lot of middle school and high school besties that are hanging around. And I love this question because, and especially hitting on what you and Michelle are saying, the season of life really does affect kind of who you're with. But I also think there's a sweetness to all of us being in different seasons. I think one of the things that the Lord quickly taught me as I was making my moves and as I was stepping into leadership positions was I was putting unrealistic expectations on what I considered community and friendship to look like. I think I had to learn that I wasn't in high school anymore and I didn't have to be friends with my sophomore group of people, that I was able to expand that I was seeing and interacting with women all across, the board in ages and in places in life. And so, I just had my 30th birthday, thank you. And it was so sweet to be able to sit at this table for a brunch that I was doing and to look and see all of the different women who, I mean, we had women in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s that were showing up to this brunch. And it was the sweetest thing when I was finally able to see, like, the blessing is mutual. It's not just, oh, well, they're mentoring me, but there is a relationship there and we're walking through seasons of life together. And so while, I'm not married, I don't have kids, there's part of that life for them where I'm not going to be able to speak on, but a really beautiful thing is I'm going to be able to listen really well. Because I don't have, much to say, or I'm going to be able to ask questions that might help whoever I'm sitting with, and they're able to do the same thing for me because they're not single and 30 years old. And so being able to, yes, absolutely have that kind of diverse adult friendships is so sweet, and has been, I think, something that has really grown and developed me in my walk with the Lord. But also being able to, and we'll get into this a little bit later, but have those just good boundaries too of when to go, okay, like I need to, be careful with what I'm saying because I'm in ministry. Like there's just some things I can't share. But who are those people that I can share those parts of my life with, if that makes sense?
That totally makes sense. I love the fact that you can bring that in. I know for me, being single all my life and then going through my 30s, 40s, and now I'm in my 50s. If I can share my age, I just had a birthday. And so, turning 54 this year and realizing like my friends that are my age are going to become grandmas at this point. You know what I mean? I'm like, what? We were just in college where we had our specific friend groups, and that's no longer the case. And in leadership, we can't afford to do that because we need all generations to speak into our lives. And if we stay with our own, we're going to be in our own little bubble and just hang out there. But as a single foster mom interacting with those other moms, like I need their help and advice. I asked Michelle, I was just going to quote something from Michelle, which she shares with her kids all the time. Well, I need Michelle's age group friendship. I need Heather's age group friendship, and I need your group friendship to speak into my life at all those different generations. So helpful in that way. And I think even we see that not just in generations, but even in different roles, like for Heather being married to a pastor's wife. And so, if she only hung out with pastor's wife and never with a single person, or never with someone who is before, like that's gone before her and are teaching, I mean, are taking care of the older generation, like Michelle is, she's not going to know how to walk into those. So we need those, even as leaders, our life friends, right?
It's so good. And if I can add to, I think there was this point too where I had to get over this like little girl concept that they were offering a seat at the table for me and they valued what I had to say. So I didn't have to be timid. I didn't have to be shy about having an opinion, or, that what I was bringing to the table wasn't enough for friendship. When at the end of the day, it was, and it was serving so many people exactly what you're saying, and giving them a whole new perspective on different areas in life. And so I had to give myself, I think, and I think you feel it too from what you've said, Alicia, of like giving myself permission to take the seat, right? You can be offered the seat at the table, but if you don't take it, right, it's a two-way street.
Right.
And so, yeah, I think take the seat, let people be your friend. Because I think as a single person, we can sometimes, especially as an introvert for myself, I get pouty and then I seclude myself and I'm like, well, forget
Same
it.
here.
Yeah. Like I'm just not going to leave then. And there's
Same here.
nothing more I think the enemy loves than secluding us and making us feel alone. And so
Yeah.
as much as we can combat that is really good.
Yeah. I
Would
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 love
it
for Heather. Can you speak on that a little bit about the different types of friendship that you've had? Because you've worn so many different hats. So if you can speak on that, because you have done that, would love to hear that.
Yeah, I think like coming into the church, you're the pastor's wife, you're new to the church, people want to know you. They want to know you. And I had a woman come sit up to me one time and she just says, "I've not talked to you. I just want to know you. Tell me about you. Who are you?" And so it like abruptly, like one, you don't think yourself really that interesting and worthy of someone coming out of their regularly scheduled program to seek you out like that. But then thinking that it's a wonderful opportunity to get to know someone. So I try to sit in those moments, and let people get to know me because it makes them comfortable with the ministry and the family. And so I try to make space and time for that. So not rushing out of the room when service is over, being the last ones there to greet and say hello for someone who might be waiting to say hello. Also in serving in ministry to women or any kind of training situations, I think always being accessible and available and oh, I just lost my thought. I just lost my thought. Oh, being available and friendly to everyone. So I may not be close friends with everyone that I serve, but if you are serving a group of women, you want to be friendly and approachable to everyone. And I try to notice the person who's off by themselves and bring them in. And maybe they're not meant to be friends with me. Maybe I'm meant to connect them with the person who's going to be their friend. And so always being available, always being aware of people who might be hesitant and bringing them to the table. I say take a seat at the table, but if you're a leader in ministry, you have to put extra chairs at the table and invite people to sit at them.
Michelle, what about for you? Like all the different spheres of influence that you've had throughout your career, throughout your ministry and leadership. What does that look like for you?
I think I have learned through the years, you know, I'm going to probably call everybody my friend. I think I even probably wrote it on the chat. Welcome, friends. Um, as I just, when I think about the life of Jesus and how he was um, not exclusive, he was always, tried to always be inclusive of people, no matter how different they were, or maybe if they were outcast, even, or didn't quite fit in. He was a friend and modeled that, uh, and so really, no matter what the depth of a relationship, I will try to lean towards wanting someone to be a friend and to be able to show kindness and compassion to them and hope that they would do the same thing. But it's really interesting to watch how people that were really, really close friends in one season of life, but then you move or you don't talk quite as much. I will always try to jump back into that friendship when I see them again, but it is different and it does change through the seasons. Um, but I think for the friendships that really have the depth, and especially in ministry, no matter where I have lived or even the distance now between us, um, the people that really pointed me to Jesus, that I knew even the hard things that they told me were for me to for my benefit and for me to be more Christ-like. Those are the friendships that really have stayed. That's probably the ones that I have a tendency to either text or call or figure out a way for us to get together, even when we're states apart, and especially ministry friendships where you've served together and, you've probably been through lots of ups and downs with a lot of different people. But I have gravitated more and more for those deeper friendships to be the people that really were life-giving to me and encouraging me in my walk with the Lord. And it's not that I'm not going to be friends with somebody who's not. It's not that I'm not going to be, I'll still be friends with somebody who's not a believer. I still want to try to be friends with them and talk through things with them. And at those points, we would talk through things with our kids, and issues we were having. And today it's, taking care of elderly parents. Um, but but it's just a different level of depth there in those. I joked with the group. I don't know how many of you all were ever in, I think it was Brownies or Girl Scouts or something. And they always used the little saying or a little song that said, keep new, make new friends, but keep the old, some are silver and the other gold. And that's kind of, I think that was ingrained into me as a little girl. And so I'm like, old friends are gold. They're golden, if you can maintain those friendships. And then new friends, even now at the age I am now, that's silver. That's worth a lot of value to make those new friends that will probably turn into gold if you allow them to. So.
What I'm hearing from each of you is just that these spheres of influences in your friendships are very important. So you want to have a sphere where they're personal friends that are your buddies. And I'm going to ask Heather to speak a little bit about not letting your hair down, all the time. So I'm going to come back to that because that was pretty interesting what she said earlier. But that there are spheres of influence, whether it be in our ministry, whether it be in our personal life and family life, right? And then our seasons of life persons that we need. And so there's kind of these different spheres that we work a lot and we network and we build those friendships. And some we need really long and deep ones, and some we need just for that time. That's what I'm hearing from you all, right? But as we're building these friendship, I know that Heather shared a little bit about even when you're building personal friendships, for us to talk a little bit about what are the boundaries, that happen. And flip side of that, what about the hiccups and the conflicts that occur when you're doing ministry alongside your friends, right? So I know that those are like two different questions, but I wanted you to share a little bit of where do the lines blur and how do you navigate those, right?
I think sometimes it can get blurred in unmet expectations, where outside of ministry, it's just kind of easy to flow. But when you're serving together, there are expectations of serving in ministry. There's trying to understand how to execute ministry. And in that, you might communicate something, or a friend might communicate something that might hurt their feelings or disappoint or rub the wrong way. And so one of the things that's very helpful is communicating expectations and trying with my longer term friends. I probably am better with this. We have a way to communicate when we're disappointed. And so when you have a newer friend in ministry, it's probably an area I could develop more. How do we talk about how we're disappointed and work through that? Because 9 times out of 10, it's just a misunderstanding. And if you can get through that, you can maintain the friendship. But if you don't address it, it makes it more difficult to serve potentially.
I think Catherine, can you just hop on for just a little bit? I know you're very behind the scenes, but I will yank her out of that behind the scenes often. Poor girl. I'm always doing that to her. But she shared a little bit about how her and her husband was actually part of a Bible study, and yet they were also friends, and then yet they were serving in ministry. So I think that is super helpful for us that are in leadership. Like, how do we navigate that? Because yes, you want to be friends with people that you serve alongside with, but at the same time, you're like, "Oh, I'm supposed to be leading them." Can you share a little bit? I love what you shared when we were talking about this.
Yeah, so my husband, he is a pastor, and so we had a small group, and we loved our small group, but it was sometimes tricky because there were people in our small group who he was actually their supervisor because they also were on the church staff with us. And then also, there were people that were like parents of students that were also in his ministry. And so, because of that, we were like, how do we create those boundaries? How do we, still show up for Bible study and, pray for each other and be, transparent with each other, but also, you know, keep those boundaries where they're not just coming to him expecting for him to do whatever they request, which sometimes happens. And so what we did was, first we prayed about it because we were like, we just needed wisdom. And then we also sought counsel from other pastors who were in similar seats because we do need those friendships. But we learned that the difference between being vulnerable and being transparent, and that those are two very different things. And so we could, share what was going on in our season of life, and we could grow together as friends. However, we didn't have to share all the details. And I think that was one of the biggest things that really, I'm going to use the word protect, but I don't mean it in like a negative sense, but it really did protect us, just because we're still, called to serve the bride first, and we wanted to protect the bride in that sense. And so, because of that, we had a great small group, and we moved from that church to a different church, but we were able to leave that small group and really had those connected relationships that we longed and prayed for. And I think a lot of that goes back to just creating those boundaries and just knowing, like, okay, we know the difference between being vulnerable and transparent, and knowing how much you can let someone in and still do life with each other.
And I kind of added the phrase selective transparency, that not everyone wants to even know everything. Yeah, as a ministry wife, me complaining about my husband taking out the trash, like either the member is going to be very protective and say, "How could you say that about Pastor?" Or they're going to say, "Oh, I've got one on him. He doesn't take out the trash." I also am very careful with my children. I've noticed that I've had to have some boundaries with friendships and the things that I share about them. One time I just joined a casual conversation about kids and something kids didn't do. And the member was very well meaning. But then, the next audience that they all had together, like they chose to talk about what my kid didn't do, like in a collective group. And harmless intention, but it's embarrassing for the kids. And so I try to have some of those selectively transparent moments, where I consider my children, my husband, my family, while I'm making friends.
I know for me, as I think through just throughout the years, just kind of what Catherine's talking about, there's always that um, um, uh, line of like, okay, transparency versus vulnerability versus, you wanting to let your hair down and needing that space and time. And so for me, I have had to learn in my ministry that there are just the circle of where I can let my hair down, because they have walked with me through so many seasons. Like, those are friends that have been with me since my freshman year of college. Those are my college girlfriends, and I see them every Christmas, every year. We already planned our meeting to this year. But they have seen me when I was not really walking with the Lord, to now where I'm able to serve God in this way. And they're on fire Christians. And kind of like Michelle shared earlier, they're the ones that spur me on. And when I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do, they're the ones that have earned the right to speak into my life and say, hey, Alicia, buck up, put your big girl pants on and let's get into, get on with it, with ministry. And so, but there are also people that will listen to me that I can share whatever I can. Now, that group is only about 3 other girls. Okay. And then there's my seminary friends that I went to seminary with that I share ministry things with. And we put things in what is called the vault. When I sit down, I say, this is in the vault. That means they're not given permission to share it with anyone, including their husbands. Okay. It is in the vault. Those are like ministry things that I can't have shared outside because it's me just processing and I need that to process. So I think those specific friendships, but also being able to learn those lessons of friendship early on would have been so helpful because I got hurt and burned quite a few times with friendships. So can you share, I know that Heather shared a little bit about that, but if Michelle and Faith, can you share what that's been like without revealing too much, of course, because this is, we're public
I'll jump in
consumption.
on this. I think you really have to look at each individual person and each individual friendship, and allow that friendship to kind of develop its own personality, and if that's a good way to say it, I don't know, because there have been people in my life that I thought, oh, we are just click, but then we didn't exactly, and the other people that I would never have dreamed would become in this really tight group of what I call soul sisters. I've got this small group of friends, kind of like you talk about your 3. I've got these 4 or 5 that they are truly. I know that there's just about everything I can share with them. It's just, and it's a deep spiritual friendship as far as sharing things about our spiritual life, sharing emotions, sharing mentally. I'm not thinking clearly on this, and I know I'm not. Help me get back on track. But they're each friendship develops just in that same spheres of almost like spheres of influence, but spheres of friendship. I read there's a really good book called Transformative Friendships, and Catherine's got it to put in I wanted to recommend, but it's I found it really good because it talks about transformative friends. Those are the friends that really know each other. Um, and so as the friendship ages, um, that knowing of one another intentionally deepens. And and it's really looking at how those transformative friendships will engage in the things that are hard, the things that are good, the fun, but also will address they do life together, but then they also address when they're stuck. And so I think those friendships have really uh, seeing the ebbs and flows of friendship, but letting each one develop its own personality and not expect every friendship to be exactly the same, because everybody's different.
I think I'll kind of talk about a weird offshoot of this, of like the sour side of this, of I think some of what Michelle had talked about of, I thought this person was going to be, in the inner circle and they've abused that or, whatever. But I think that when those relationships don't work out, that doesn't give us permission to then go into our shells and go, no more friendships. That there has to be this time of healing, absolutely, of processing through what you need to process through and understanding like what are some things that I need to adjust in maybe how I'm speaking to those people I'm just developing those relationships with, but also not being, I think, overly cautious to the point where you are so shut down that nobody can even get to the heart of who you are. And I think with that too is extending grace when people in any spheres of your friendships mess up. My thing is, Elisa, you had the vault. My thing, this is a level 10 conversation. That's mine. I'm gonna like give them levels. If it's a level 10, it's not leaving, once it's said, no one says it ever again. And I think there have been times where, someone accidentally said something or, whatever, and it doesn't change necessarily their heart. Their heart is still good. Sometimes we mess up because unfortunately we're humans and we're friends with humans. And so sin sneaks in there, mess ups sneak in there. And so to be able to have, the moment to be like, man, like I'm really grieved by that. How can we deepen our friendship and go, how can we make that not happen again? How can I better communicate? It's kind of what Heather talked about, those moments of conflict and being willing to, get, down in the dirty conversations and go, this is what's really been bothering me. And we're not going to be able to move forward until we discuss this and work through it, but being able to receive it on the other side too, because I am not the best friend in the world always. And so there's going to be times where I have been hurt, but where I've also been the person that's hurt somebody else. And so I think sometimes we get really me in our friendships. What do they bring to me? How do they enhance my life? How do they help me with situations? But also, how are you serving and loving really well? What are the things you need to take accountability for where there just was a mess up? Because we're people, and that's okay.
I love how you mentioned that, Faith, that friendships are very much give and take, right? That sometimes we don't enter into friendships of like, what can I get out of you? Because that would feel really yucky on my end receiving is, what can you get out of me? Then that I feel being used, in that process. Where when it's mutually beneficial, that friendship flourishes and it thrives. And um, it can be vary from age to different ages to different ministry areas to it's just there are those what we call Anne of Green Gables bosom friends, that you create. Those of you who read Anne of Green Gables, or soul sisters, as Michelle had just said, soul friends, So there are those that we want to create that because it's that mutuality of giving and taking. Because if you always give, then it becomes a ministry. If you're always taking, then you're being ministered to, but they're not being ministered to. And so I think those are very important things to think through quite often, right? As we look at that. So one of the things that you were mentioning about resources, Michelle, you had mentioned one. I immediately thought of this old book, 2008, so not too old for some of us, but it's called The Friendships of Women by Dee Briston. That was an excellent book and very helpful for me in terms of understanding friendship. Because I thought that was the weirdest thing, was like, why do ministry leaders need friendship? Well, until you started being in ministry and your friendship became more of ministry, not necessarily friendships, because they were taking and you were always giving. That is a discipleship role. That is a ministry role. But when do you blend, it's that mutuality of give and take. Faith, you had unmuted, so I want you to share what you need to share.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you. I think going off of your resources too, one that Lifeway has is the Essentials Conference for, women or student ministers. Because one of those, I think, spheres of people where you can have, especially if you are a minister, or even across the board, where you need someone who understands but isn't in your town. Who doesn't know the people, who they don't know the
Yes.
church, they don't know any of that, where you're able to say, I'm just going to word vomit these things. Here, my heart is for this. Here, my heart is for these people. How do I, best handle this conversation? Because I care about them so much. How do I handle this situation? They're walking through so much that I'm not just able to go to someone else within the church and talk this through, because it's a level 10 conversation.
Right.
And so I think with the essential stuff, it's a really great resource where you're able to gather with other people who are walking through similar things and go like, I hear your heart. No one's ever said it like that. And that's exactly how I'm feeling. Those are the same questions I have. So if you haven't looked at that, it's a really great event.
Yeah, and just kind of along with that, Faith, what you mentioned, sometimes some of the friendships are in your church or right there in your community. Sometimes they're not. the thing that I've also learned is sometimes I got to be willing to take the risk and make the first move. Somebody that I think, I, we're not at the same church, or we're not, in the same, even exactly the same type of ministry. But it's like I need to be the one to reach out and to take the risk and just start a conversation, whatever it is, to kind of build a little bit of a friendship, and then let it develop if that's what the Lord has for it. And if not, you've still made a good acquaintance that is in ministry that maybe does something really similar to you, that could be a good sounding board at some point. But it's scary. Even it was scary once you hit about, I don't know, in kindergarten, you just make friends with everybody, and then the older you get, the more challenging it gets to be, because we know our flaws, and we know where we're weak, and we know where we're insecure, and that vulnerability is so important, but so hard.
I think like that, what Faith brought up is excellent, not just because it's a plug for Essentials, which just let me explain just a little bit too. With Essentials, what we do is we bring together leaders who have been in ministry, women's ministry for 3 years or less, and we gather them. It doesn't matter the age, it matters how long they've been serving in the women's ministry position. And so we bring about 25 ladies, and basically Lifeway covers their room and food and all of those things, and they just find a way to get there, and we take care of the rest for them. And so it's a wonderful way for us to minister to new leaders. But in those areas, we often put them in round tables. And so ladies, may find yourself in other situations with other women's ministry leaders. Take that phone out and say, can I get your contact? Can we start something together? And so Faith, I know, has a group of women that are girls ministers, that she can really go and say, I am struggling in this area with these girls. I have that with women's ministry leaders in my area. And we're constantly looking for that. So there's a lot of cohorts that are out there that are starting. We're thinking through about how ways we can connect women's ministry leaders across. So be on the lookout for that as well, of us thinking through cohorts and what that means. But even whenever you're congregating with like-minded people in your ministry, they may not look like you, but they understand that the areas of ministry, connect with them. Pastors' wives, the same thing. If there are other pastors' wives, they may not even be part of your area, but man, do they understand what it's like to be a pastor's wife, or a girls minister, or a ministry leader, in a parachurch organization. Connect with them. Start with that phone and just say, can I have your contact? Maybe 4 or 5 of us can gather, once every 2 months or something like that. Start those friendships. I think that's one of the things as leaders, is for us to go out there and just not be afraid. Michelle, I'm like, I know, it's like when we're in kindergarten, will you be my friend? We just need to start out that way, right? Just, will you be my friend? And I would just encourage you to step out, even for us. I'm an introvert. People always think I'm extrovert. And I'm like, I do that because God's called me into ministry. And I cannot do ministry not saying anything to anyone. I would love to do that. I would be happy staying in my own room reading a book all day long with coffee or tea. That's my happy place. But that does not serve God well in the kingdom well, okay, for me. And so I want to encourage you, those friendships though are important, because scripture says it all over the place, from Jesus having friends to David having friends to, the list goes on. The fact that Jesus had women friends, okay? So it's so important to ministry as we think through that. I want to switch over and talk a little bit, if you guys can share, or you ladies, y'all can share a little bit about suggestions that you would have, like tips for building friendship. What has worked for you? I think Heather shared a little bit about just taking that time, but there are a lot of tips. And so let's go through some tips and advice as a leader. How do we build friendships, and what kind of friends?
I'm probably the worst social media friend you could ever have. I'll just go and say that up front, because that wasn't a part of my life. I mean, Faith, I look at the two of us, and the difference, because I'm sure for most of your life, you've had your friends on social media as well as your friends in person. I only had friends in person. You know, I was a long time before I could even email a friend. You know what I'm saying? I mean, that just wasn't a thing. You know, you called your friends or you saw them. That was it. And so I know that like making new friends, it can be challenging. But the thing I've had to give myself the tip over and over again: go first, and as hard as it is, trust first. Be the first person to show that you will trust them with something, you know, whatever it is. And it doesn't have to be the deepest, darkest secret. That's not what I mean. Um, but I've really had to push myself to go first because it is hard to trust the way that just, you know, friendships that didn't go so well, you know, the girls that hurt you when you were in middle school or elementary school or high school or whatever, um and you carry those things with you throughout your whole life. And so constantly being a person that says, okay, I'm going to be the one that goes first. I'm going to trust her. um I for me, I want to draw out the spiritual connection that we have in Christ. So I'm the one to be to ask the questions, how can I pray for you? I will jump into the deep spiritually faster than probably a lot of people are comfortable with. But that's been a good tip for me to gauge really how deep will this friendship go in some ways, you know, because there's some people I will go as deep as I can with them, but if we don't have a spiritual connection through Christ, it really is going to come to a place that there's like a boundary there, and there's a wall that I can't I can't make them come over that to you know what I'm saying? And I'm not going to go backwards to who I was before Christ. So you know, that going first and trusting, um and being willing to be a to start out at least being a spiritual leader, because then hopefully as iron sharpens iron, you do that for one another as you're both growing in Christ.
I Michelle, as you were saying that, I was thinking about my AIM or AOL name. Did you guys have this? My little chat name on there. But I love everything that you said. When I was thinking through it as well, one of the things, as you talk about, you know, boundaries, I think is the other way too of one of the things we joke around at my church and in my community is that I'm allowed to have multiple best friends, but I am everyone's best friend, is what I tell them. And it's just a, you know, funny thing that everyone knows is like, well, Faith is my best friend, I guess. But on the other side of that is I've had to learn when it's okay to be like, my capacity right now, like whether it's I just feel like I'm not able to love everybody really well right now, or this talking about seasons, this season of life that I'm in, like I am in the trenches of planning camp for student ministry, you know, or I am in the, you know, trenches of, you know, going through loss or experiencing things in my own world that I'm just needing to kind of go down and deal with a couple small, you know, group of people. And I love one of the things as we were kind of praying and chatting through this that Catherine said. I hope it's okay that I say this. But one of the things she says was, we can't be everyone's friend, but we can make sure everyone has a friend. And so I think I had to give myself that permission. She said it so well of everyone that I meet, I don't have to put the pressure on myself of I have to be their best friend. I need to serve them at whatever capacity. I need to invite them in. I need to do X, Y, or Z. But knowing when it's I have to put a boundary here, and maybe right now, like I am not that friend for them, but I know a bunch of other people who can. And I know, Michelle, you have so much good richness about this too.
Well, you know what's so funny? I have a friend that just bouncing off that, that I don't know where she found this statistic. I have no idea, but she said you really can only maintain that, I guess psychologists, researchers, whatever, you really can only maintain about 150 relationships. Now, I don't know what maintaining means exactly, because 150 seems like a whole
Feels like
lot.
that feels like a lot.
But it seems like a whole lot. But she will on her Facebook or whatever, like if it goes over 151, boom, she she knocks somebody off. I'm
You
like,
did
really?
that.
But that's it for me. I'm like, okay, truly, you've got you've got your family, you've got your coworkers, your a certain amount of people at your church that you're ministering with and to and friendships with, but really trying to really keep up with what's going on with more than I can't keep up with 150 people, even on social media. I can't keep up with that many. So I thought that was an interesting uh, kind of little stat. And again, I don't know. Somebody will have to verify that because I have no idea where she got that from. But
That is so good though. And I think with that, I've had to work through like the guilt of having to be okay with that. And the guilt in friendships in general of um knowing like I don't have to say that. I don't have to every time someone asks me how I'm doing, go like, well, you better sit down. I'm about to unload it on you. And that doesn't mean that I'm not being honest. It just means I'm being like careful of what's happening and careful with the friendships. And so it's good.
well, and you look at Jesus, he had the 3 and then he had the 12 and then, sent out 70. And you even look at that model, and you kind of go, yeah, there's really only so much relationally we can do and really as far as time capacity. Yeah.
I want to make a shirt that says, let's be friends.
That's great. That's great. Well, one of the
You
things we
know,
want to also give for our, if we can, just jump in to allow people to look at some of the question and answers because we have about 4 question and answer that we want to do. But also feel free on chat to just list some of your resources that you have used perhaps in the past that have been really helpful for you to understand about friendships and perhaps boundaries or hiccups or whatever the case may be. I'm gonna let Heather share for just a little bit, and then we're gonna jump right into the question and answer. And Michelle, if you can take the lead on that after
Yeah,
Heather,
I
because
will.
I don't want to cut Heather off.
oh no, I was just gonna say, one of the things is allowing seasons with friendships to change. As you get older and you walk through life, you see the different seasons that you can go through. And so right now I have a friend who has been ill for several years, and we are deep, good, rich friends. And so we had to learn how to communicate and to relate to ourselves in a way alongside this illness, that would still meet her needs and she would still meet my needs. And so there's a lot of give and take. And so while we're always open to making new friends and new seats at the table, maybe there's opportunities to pray about that friend that you might have fallen out of touch with, that God's just really put on your heart, or being willing to fight a good fight to hold on to a friend who's just going through a really hard time. But it's still a good, healthy friendship for you. So I'm going to be praying for those of you who are in tough seasons of friendship that aren't harmful, but they're just difficult. That God would give us the grace to weather some of the storms that come our way.
Okay, we've got some great questions, and I'm jumping in. So, Faith and Heather, there's one particular person, a long-term friendship, 30 plus years, and but more recently, they're really only connected to one another in times when this other person is struggling with something. I mean, it's been a devoted friendship, but it's really not flourishing. They only connect when this other person has needs, or that's the only time I guess she reaches out to um, whoever's on the chat with us. But have you kind of like what do you do when with a friendship that's not growing? It's not life-giving, as I said earlier. But then have you ever told a friend that you need to step away from that friendship?
I think with that is making sure you've had an intentional conversation first. Because
Mhm.
I think there are some times where we're just so over it that we just want to go ahead and cut ties rather than doing the hard work of, okay, let's go and we're going to be uncomfortable and it's going to be weird.
Mhm.
um, but let's start there and kind of see. And it sounds like, you know, they've been friends for a long time. So I'm sure that has happened, but I think for other people listening, like, please don't shy away from that hard work, because like we've talked about, it is going to deepen a relationship if you can both stick it through and come into it selfless and go, is this fair? My pastor always says that about a conversation. Am I being fair in this situation, or is it my emotions? Is it I haven't slept or had a good like rich meal or exercising a little bit and I just need to like chill for a second. Um but I also think too, it is really exhausting when you do feel like you are becoming the minister in that relationship. And I think there's a way to kind of transition into having some space. But also, I think there is a point too where you can have that conversation and being open and honest. And there's a way to do that lovingly. I think if you know that person and they're not going to handle it well, there's also a way to transition that gracefully. Um, but also, I think there's a point where you still need to be intentional every once in a while to be like, I'm going to take them to lunch. And if it's just me sitting and listening, like that's what it's going to be. And just letting it kind of exist in that space. I don't know if that makes sense, but
No, it does, yeah. And I think there's always ebb and flow. Sometimes friendships, one person seems to be giving more than the other or talking more than the other, and the other one's a listener during that season. And so they do have that up and down. I would say I don't know the situation of this particular woman, but there are certain things. If there's somebody that I would say is only reaching out to you or only responding to you when they are in a state of crisis or struggle or whatever, it might be, and especially if you feel really limited in how much you can help them, it might be, a suggestion to say, I think it would be really helpful if you, maybe met with somebody at your, if you're not at the same church, or if you are, met with somebody that's really more experienced in counseling through this, and because it might be, especially if it's hard on you to handle all that they're uh, uh, sharing with you, but you really don't have you don't feel like you have the answers to help them move on or whatever, or to get the help they need. Another great question here. This person says they feel like they're a very friendly person, but how do you handle rejection or disappointment if you're trying to seek out new friendships with other women of all ages? But maybe they're not responding the way that you'd hoped. And she says, I feel like I'm out of touch when I try to foster relationships with younger women. How would you answer that? Either one of you.
I'd say stay out of isolation and be available. Try to see if there are any patterns that you can notice, but continue to stay available. And sometimes I have to surrender the disappointment to God and say, He knows best. Maybe the friendship I thought I would have had is not the one that would have come to fruition. And so you really have to trust God. You really have to lean in, resist the urge to isolate, and try to see if you have any patterns that you can pray through.
Mhm, mhm. And I don't know, just I test on the line introvert extrovert, okay? So depending on the day, I may be very introverted or I might be more extroverted. And so if you are a high E, high extroverted, you probably do want to make new friends with a lot of people all the time, but somebody who maybe is a little bit more reserved or a little bit more introverted, it might be that is almost, it's not that they don't want to be friends, but they need a little bit more time to develop the trust that you need there. But don't give up. Don't give up. Always be friendly, I think, and always be kind. Okay, what are some good ways to intentionally nurture or deepen a friendship? And this is our last question.
I would say, and kind
Intentionally
of
nurture.
adding on to the last question too, is inviting each other into the everyday spaces. And also with the other one too, like it's not always you. And I say that like teasing in a sense of like people nowadays are just so busy. And there have been times where I have just thought, you know what? I know they don't hate me. I know that. And I have to kind of speak it over myself multiple times and just go, it's just they're really busy. And so I think Heather, you might have said it too, but inviting people into like the every ordinary day places of, hey, it's last minute, but I have to run to the grocery store. Would you like to come and get coffee? Do you need groceries too? We can go together. It doesn't have to be an extravagant, friendship date planned every single time. It can be just the in between boring moments of life that are more fun with people.
Good, good. Anything else? I think it's time to wrap.
Yes, I was going to say, unfortunately, it is time. The hour has passed, and we so thank you, Faith and Heather and Michelle and Catherine, and so enjoyed the ladies that have been able to join us. We will be coming back in January, so we will see you on the other side in 2025. I hope you can join us. I hope I didn't miss anything. This was the first time I've been hosting. Michelle and Catherine have been holding down the fort until I'm able to step in, and so grateful for Michelle. We hope to see Michelle continuously still on the webinars, because I know she's stepping back a little bit from helping in this role. And so grateful for Faith and Heather, who's joining from high school that she teaches at, to just be with us. So grateful, and Faith, for where you're serving as well. And so, ladies, thank you so much. The recording will be on our YouTube channel, and Catherine has put the link there. So if you want to share it with other people, that would be lovely. Ladies, I will see you in 2 months. Hopefully, take care.
Take care, ladies.
Thank you.